On episode 228 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Joe Pizzorno and discuss his book, The Toxin Solution. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/228. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. I wanted to take just a moment to thank some folks that have taken the time to go do a rating and review for the show. You know, these ratings and reviews on iTunes really do help us get noticed. So I have three. One is by Tomato55 from the U.S., and he writes, "Thank you for helping us stay on track." And then Ken P. Durham, also from the United States, writes, "Alan Meisner continually surprises me with each new episode. He doesn't just focus physical workouts, but also hits other target areas like diet and mental well-being. Don't let the title fool you, as 20 plus would get just as much from this as well as 60 plus. He also interviews people from all walks of life, and oftentimes they may have a different philosophy or strategy than Alan, but he shares their view, allowing us to make decisions that work for our lifestyle. Thanks, Alan, and look forward to each new episode." And then MJ Pred 7 from the UK writes, "Alan always gives a warts and all assessment of health topics. It's my go-to podcast for down-to-earth advice." Well, I want to thank all three of you for that. I really do appreciate the feedback, and it's good to hear that I'm doing the right things to fit your health and fitness needs, and I hope to continue to do so. Now, if you haven't left a rating or review for the podcast, I'd really like to ask you to do that. The ratings, the reviews, the subscriptions, all of those are ways that we can get attention to the podcast and get other people to find this information. I do work really hard to try to get the best guests on here. Again, many of them, as Ken said, they don't agree with my direct philosophy or strategy, but I think it's important for us to have that conversation so you kind of know what's out there and realizing that, yes, we all kind of are unique little butterflies and we're all going to have to follow our own health and fitness journey. And so having this information and trying to boil it down into something that's usable, something you can act on today and try, books that you can go and get more information. I want to make sure that I continue to bring that great information to you and to others. So I want to continue to grow the podcast. And I really do appreciate the time that you take each and every time you come to listen to a podcast. I really do appreciate you being here and appreciate all the ratings and reviews. So thank you, and please keep those coming. So today we're going to talk to Dr. Joe Pizzorno, and he's a pretty interesting guy. He's a naturopathic doctor, and he came up during a time when that field was really under a lot of pressure by the medical establishment. And as a result, over the course of his career, he founded Badger University, which is a wellness, naturopathic teaching school, and one of the biggest and largest accredited ones today. He has also served as president councils for both President W. Bush and Bill Clinton. So, this is a guy who's been in the industry for quite some time, knows his stuff, and his book, The Toxin Solution, is really kind of a great primer and a great approach because it's a full 8-week program to help you get past what's hurting us, which is the toxins in the air, the food, and what we put on our skin with our health and beauty aids. So, with no further ado, I will welcome Dr. Pizzorno. So, Dr. Pizzorno, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Well, thank you for the invitation to talk with you today.
Your book, The Toxin Solution, is something that I think is near and dear to my heart. And the first thing I want to do, I really want to start this with, you're a naturopathic doctor that kind of came up in an era where that really wasn't the hip thing to do, and in fact was actually dangerous for your career overall. So I want to thank you for, kind of working through those pioneering years, because quite frankly, I think we would be worse off if it weren't for folks like you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Now, the Toxin Solution, I think most of us know, okay, toxins are managed by our gut. They're by our liver and, our kidneys. That's their filtering responsibility. But you really kind of put us through I guess I would say, A to Z course here of, okay, there's all these toxins coming in. They're coming in from your gut. They're coming in from your skin. They're just all around us. And until we actually start slowing down the ends, the filter part is actually not going to do us that much good. I really like that thought process because I think it's so easy for folks to think, well, we got this filtering system, so, what the hey, let's just let it do its job. But it doesn't do its job very well if we don't take care of it.
Yes, and I'd like to add to what you said there. So realize that a lot of these toxins we're being exposed to today, they're new to nature molecules. And what I mean by that was that they were designed by scientists to have some specific purposes. Number one is, you might say, physical or biological purposes. So physical purposes like being non-stick, or physical purposes like keeping clothing from burning. And the other purpose are more biological, like insecticides and such. But they're also designed to be difficult to break down. And that's pretty obvious why the researchers would do that, because there's not much point in creating these chemicals and spraying them on food or spraying them on clothing and have them break down real quickly. So they were designed to to be very difficult to break down, which means our liver's normal detoxification processes simply don't work very well because they're hard to break down. And probably the best way to realize how hard they are to break down is to look at their half-lives in the body. So half-life determines how long it takes for the body to get rid of something, get it out of the body. And some of these things have half-lives that are measured in years. And some of them are so bad, like PCBs, for example, or DDT, that their half-lives are 3 to 25 years. So the problem is, once they get into your body, they're very, very difficult to get out. And as long as they're in your body, they're constantly causing damage.
Yeah, it's funny when you use that term half-life. I started my college career majoring in physics. And, we'd look at radioactive materials and say, okay, the half-life. And when you realize, okay, well, the half-life actually explains when half of it's gone. And then you've got to work on half of half and half of half. And the real math of that is there's always going to be some part of that there, over time, half of half, half of half. It never goes to zero exactly. I mean, it'll get down to a point where it's so small it doesn't matter, but we don't live that long. So something that's 20-year half-life, we're going to be dealing with that for a substantial portion or pretty much the rest of our lives because we just really can't break it down fast enough to really clear us out. And so one of the things you get into the book, which, we talk a lot about sugar, we talk a lot about foods and just kind of, what you should and shouldn't eat and whatnot. But with these toxins, the basic thing is they're causing a lot of these diseases. And, I think we all like simple solutions. We like, okay, well, if we just cut our calories or we just cut our sugar, then we're going to live happy, healthy lives. And the math in general seems to kind of support that. But these toxins are also huge, huge components to disease. And so there's several disease cause agents that you kind of talk about in the book as far as how toxins do cause disease in our body. Would you mind kind of going about that and kind of explaining the whys of how toxins are doing this to us?
So that's, I think, very important. So when we look at the toxins, they kind of have two general ways they damage us. Number one are, might say, non-specific ways. And so almost all of the chemical and metal toxins increase oxidative stress within the body. Now, what does oxidative stress do? Well, it increases inflammation, and it also damages our DNA. So while we're relatively young, we may not see a lot of effects from the toxins because our bodies have a lot of adaptive ability. But once you hit about the age of 40, you now are losing your adaptive ability because accumulated DNA damage, but also accumulation of the chemical toxins and metal toxins in the body. The second thing toxins do is then to have specific damaging effects. So, for example, some toxins might, like PCBs, will impair our thyroid's ability to produce thyroid hormones. Toxins like PCBs will increase women's risk of getting breast cancer. Toxins like arsenic will increase men's risk of getting prostate cancer. So it turns out you can start looking at each of these toxins and look at how they specifically damage the body. And as they damage the body, disease accumulates. I've been involved in medicine for a long time, almost half a century now. First as a researcher in conventional medicine, then as a student in naturopathic medicine, and then as a clinician, and then starting Boston University and writing books and journals and things like this. I've been very, very involved in this field. And over this half century, I've seen a big change in why people are sick. When I first was involved in clinical practice back in the late 70s, most of my patients were having disease because of nutritional deficiencies or lack of exercise and things of this nature, smoking, those kinds of things. So you might say they were being sick because of active decisions they were making or not making. That's changed now. And what's happened is we now have passive promotion of disease. And by passive, I mean that it doesn't matter if you're eating food, conventional grown foods it doesn't matter exactly what you're doing. What's mattering is that you're indirectly getting these toxins. So, for example, you're eating foods. Well, foods conventionally grown have high levels of pesticides in them. If you're drinking water that's in the city, it's more likely to be polluted. But in particular, we now know that 10% of the water supplies in the U.S., the public water supplies, have arsenic levels that are high enough to induce disease. If you're living in a city, well, you're getting benzene in the air, you're getting what are called polyaromatic hydrocarbons, you're getting particulate matter. If you're using health and beauty aids, well, every time you put a healthy beauty aid on that has a fragrance in it, that fragrance is solubilized and stabilized by what are called phthalates. Well, these phthalates poison the insulin receptor sites on the cells. So that means that our cells can't get sugar in because they don't respond to insulin the way they should. So the pancreas has to overproduce insulin to get the sugar into the cells. Well, that's fine. That's part of our adaptive ability. But when you do that for 20 or 30 years, after a while, you basically wear out the pancreas. And when you wear out the pancreas, you now have diabetes. I was mentioning the kidneys. We're now seeing epidemic failure of kidneys because so many of these toxins damage the kidneys when the kidneys try to get them out of our body. So you add it up all together, and we're basically increasing the rate at which we age, increasing the rate at which we get disease, decrease the amount of energy because we can't produce thyroid hormones. You look at the whole picture, and it's pretty grim.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you've touched on a lot of points there. It's like, our cell processes are driven pretty much by enzymes, and toxins are going to mess with them. Pretty much every aspect of our ability to be who we are as humans is going to be affected by hormones, and these toxins pretty much mess with them. You talk about, our ability to grow and be healthy with the minerals that we need to, do the things in our bones or all that. And these are going to mess with them. And then you talked about our kidneys, but all of our organs at some level are relying on the nutrition and what we bring into our body to manage them. And so they're going to be affected. So on so many levels, and then even at DNA level, we're really talking about subjecting ourselves voluntarily and involuntarily to things that are going to shorten our lives. So as you get into this, now you kind of talk about, we're going to have a toxin load. There's no way to get around it. But there are ways for us to reduce our load. So could you kind of get into some ways that, if I'm sitting here saying, okay, I understand that, okay, all this stuff. And, it was funny because I think, the soldiers coming back from Vietnam were suffering from illnesses we had not seen before. And you could kind of they were able to trace that back and say, okay, they were exposed to things that chemical agents and whatnot that cause these things. And then now our soldiers are coming back from various conflicts across the world and kind of facing some similar or maybe even worse episodes now. But we're normal people walking around the United States or wherever we are in the world thinking, okay, I'm living a good, pretty much healthy life, trying to eat good food, but I'm still being exposed to these things. What can I do to protect myself from this stuff?
That is an extremely important question because indeed, as you say, if we are choosing to live the modern lifestyle, and, I don't know about you, but I'd rather live in civilization than in a cave somewhere.
I don't know. Every once in a while, I would choose the cave. There's days, flip a coin. That cave looks pretty good some days, but I get you. Yeah. Some days, most days, I would choose civilization over the cave.
So there's basically two strategies. Strategy number one is to become much more conscious about how the toxins get into our bodies and to stop it happening. And as I mentioned, many of these toxins have half-lives measured from months to decades. So the best strategy is just don't let them in. So we have to start with the main source of the toxins, and the main source of the toxins is food. So unfortunately, our foods have insecticides on them. They have pesticides. If they're growing water with arsenic in it, like rice, it'll absorb the arsenic very efficiently. If they're fertilized with high-phosphate fertilizers, most high-phosphate fertilizers are very high in cadmium. So it turns out that the foods are the primary source of the chemical and metal toxins. The second most important source, to some degree, it depends upon where you live. So, for example, as I mentioned, there are many water supplies in the U.S. where the arsenic levels are high. So water can be a significant source of toxins. We have the health and beauty aids, as we talked about. And the good news is that you can choose health and beauty aids that are low in toxins. Your household cleaning supplies. You can use household cleaning supplies that have a lot of chemicals in them, or you can do what we do in our home, and that is because my wife makes up the clean solution, which is water and vinegar, and she likes to put in a little bit of rosemary oil or a little of, kind of any of the scented, natural scents in it, like a lavender, for example. That's her favorite. And these things are really, really low toxicity. So we can make a lot of choices to not let these things in. But the other part is to facilitate our body's own natural processes for getting them out of the body. And the most important of those may sound pretty simple, but it turns out it is increase the amount of fiber in your diet. So our livers, despite how hard these chemicals are, they do work to get rid of them. And the main way they do that is they bind them to various molecules in the body, particularly glutathione is a very important molecule. It binds these chemical toxins to glutathione and then dumps them into the gut. Now, as we evolved as a species, we had between 100 and 150 grams of fiber in the gut, and so the toxins would then bind to the fiber and go out through our stools. Unfortunately, the standard American diet now has only 15 to 20 grams a day of fiber, which means there's not enough fiber there to bind to the toxins, so they come back into the body through something that's called intrahepatic recirculation. So we go through all this metabolic energy to get rid of the toxins, and we just put them back in the body. So it's critical to increase the fiber. Now, if you want to take a dietary supplement, the best one from my perspective is N-acetylcysteine. So NAC for short is a very important supplement because it promotes the production of glutathione in the body. And glutathione plays two key roles. Number one is glutathione is the most important antioxidant in the body, so it helps protect us from those oxidative effects from the toxins. And in addition, by increasing the amount of glutathione, we help the liver get the chemical toxins out of the body more effectively. But again, there's not much point in taking glutathione, increase your glutathione levels if you don't know what it's binding to in the liver, dumping out from the bile into the gut.
Okay. So now, right now, I have like 4 different questions swirling in my head right now that I have to ask. And so first I'm gonna start with this. Okay. So, with our foods, and maybe it's not a question so much as just to say a compliment, is in the book, obviously, as you get into the book, there's 12 foods, and actually I guess there's 14 when you had the little asterisks on the bottom there, but there's 14 foods in the book, and I'm not going to spill them here. You can look them up online, or you can buy the book, which, yes, please buy this book, because this is a great primer to help you understand what this is all about. But you talk about foods that you should buy that are organic. And then you even share 15 foods that it's okay for us to buy that are not organic. And most of the foods that you would buy that are not organic have kind of this outside shell that's not letting, the foods, not letting the chemicals in as much. So, avocado with a hard shell is going to be a little bit better for you, non-organic. Whereas if an apple or kale or something like that is going to be a little bit more absorbive of those kind of materials and maintain them in your diet. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So maybe that wasn't so much a question as just something that was in my head of saying, that was one of the things out of the book that if I got nothing else, that was worth the value of the book, is to have those kind of lists handy to say, okay, when I'm buying my food, this is how I should think about it. So I'm not bringing it in through my food. And then I guess my second question, which is really, again, more of a compliment, is you turn me on to this Think Dirty app, which allows you to actually look at the barcode on your stuff. And I haven't had time. I did download the app. It's actually on my phone now. I'm going to be in my bathroom and in my kitchen, I guess, looking at the things that I put on my body, the health and beauty aids. I think I'm below average on that. I don't know that I use as many as most, but I do, wash with certain, body washes and whatnot from time to time. And I use certain soaps and, I shave and do the things. So, you have a recommendation that I think ladies use less than 3. And I know, ladies, that sounds crazy.
Right.
But, you're talking about your body and its ability to absorb these things in. And the less you put in, the less your organs have to then deal with. And I think that's kind of a critical point of the book is if you don't start at that point, less in, then, the rest of it is really not going to give you the benefits that you really are after. And then kind of the next step here of this whole thing is, and this is just a personal curiosity, as I've kind of looked at this and talked, listened to various things and read various things, as you talked about using kind of precursors to glutathione. What are your thoughts about actually supplementing with glutathione? when it's in that liposomal base and you're able to actually absorb some of it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. So the issue of how to increase glutathione levels in the body is a little bit controversial. The obvious thing is, well, just take glutathione, oral glutathione. The problem is the oral glutathione, the unmodified oral glutathione, is broken down by the digestive process into cysteine. So while oral glutathione will increase glutathione levels in the body, it's actually a really inefficient and expensive way to do that. Now, in contrast, topical or liposomal glutathione will go into the body intact without being broken down. So basically, the cheapest way to increase glutathione levels in the body is to take N-acetylcysteine or to consume whey powder. Both are very effective. So, for example, 500 milligrams of NAC twice a day will increase your red blood cell levels of glutathione by about 30%. Same thing with about 15 grams of whey powder a day. That'll increase your RBC glutathione by about 30%. Oral glutathione, you can increase your RBC glutathione by 30%, but it costs many times more. So it's just not a very cost-effective way of doing it.
And so then kind of my final wrap-up on this whole thing is, so as we get into this, obviously we clean up our food, but you actually have kind of a jumpstart diet. And your total program is like 8 weeks. But I want to kind of leave everyone here with really thinking about what your first 2 weeks is all about. So Amazon delivers really quickly. Some other booksellers might be a little slower, but you can start the 2 weeks and you have some do's and don'ts. And you start with the don'ts, which I actually like that approach because I think it's easier to eliminate bad things than it is sometimes to add good things. But could you go through your do's and don'ts that are in your Jumpstart diet? Because I actually think these are brilliant. I think that's a great opportunity for folks to say, okay, because we like simple. Everybody likes simple. And here's this is as simple as it gets. Don't do these things and do these things, and you're so much better off.
Yes. So we can give some details, and I will, but I want to kind of step back and say, what's the big picture? And the big picture is, I've seen so many patients over the years. I've done corporate wellness programs where I've dealt with thousands of people. And it's going to sound really simple, but when we start with the don'ts are don't eat refined foods. Don't eat refined foods that are conventionally grown, that are stored in plastic containers. Because when you eat foods that are conventionally grown and stored in plastic containers, not only you get the pesticides and the metals from the foods, but then from the plastic containers, you get things like bisphenol A and phthalates and things like this that damage the body. So the corresponding do is eat real food. The more we modify the food, the more we change its characteristic, the more intensely we cook it, the more we cook it on things like Teflon-coated pans and such, the more we're actually damaging the foods and putting chemicals into them. So you need to eat real foods. Not only do you need to eat real foods, they should be organically grown. And when you prepare the foods, you have to be careful not to damage them. So when you cook foods on Teflon, for example, or any of these nonstick coatings of that nature with their perfluorinated hydrocarbons, you're putting chemicals into the foods. When you store your foods at home, get rid of all your plastic containers. Just get glass containers. When you buy your food from the store, for example, you want to buy nut butter in glass containers. Don't buy nut butters in plastic containers because that oily nut butter very efficiently absorbs the chemical toxins from the plastics. So I don't know how to say this. It's actually really simple. The closer you eat to nature, the safer you are. And the further you get from nature, the more likely you are to damage your body. So rather than say, okay, eat this food and not that food, what I'm saying is, look at the food. Is it something you would find on a farm? If it's something you would find on a farm, particularly an organic farm, you're going to be just fine. But if it's something you're only going to find in a box, or in plastic in a grocery store, you're very likely to run into trouble. And it's going to be even worse to the degree to which you consume such foods that have had lots of chemicals added to them. So, for example, if you're going to buy a processed food, look at the label. If it says anything other than foods, if the label is 20 words long and most of those words are chemical names you can't understand, well, that's not going to be very good for you. It's just not the kind of thing you want to be putting into your body.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, what I know about you, Doctor, is that you're probably going to live a lot more like your great-grandfather than the 2 generations between. And you guys will get the inside joke when we get the book, is that there's a lot to be said for the Western diet, and there's a lot to be said for when you get back to eating the foods that, we're intended to eat. And the longer your food can sit on a shelf, the worse it is for you. And so again, Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. I really do appreciate the book. I think it's a great resource for folks, and I do hope they go out and get it, because it makes it easy to understand why we are the way we are and what's going on here, and why, when we talk about when I talk about shopping farmers markets and literally getting as close to the food as you can, knowing that it's something that's real and not something that's going to sit on a shelf for months or years, is valuable. This book is really kind of the answer to how we can heal ourselves. And beyond just dealing with the foods and whatnot we should eat, is once you're kind of in this element, we're going to be exposed. There's plants, there's other things we cannot separate ourselves from. It's just the nature of the beast, of the fish we're going to eat, the food we're going to eat. Some of it's going to be polluted. It just is. So what can we do to fix our liver? What can we do to fix our kidney? All of that's there. And I really appreciate that. So if someone wanted to learn more about you or get more information about the book, where would you like for me to send them?
Before I say that, may I make another comment?
Absolutely.
This is my 11th book, okay? And I've done, as you might expect, I've done lots of interviews on my books. This is the first time that when I've done the interviews, the interviewees have actually read my book. Okay, now, that's not meant to be pejorative about people. Everybody's busy, but there's something about the idea of toxins hurting us that people really get. And so my interviews have been a lot more fun because people are asking substantive questions, okay? Because it's a problem that just all this disease now is due to these toxins. So where do you get my book? So obviously Amazon. Just on Amazon, you can get it as a hardback, or you can get it as a download, as an ebook for your Kindle. I also have a website, toxinsolution.com, kind of obvious. And on the toxinsolution.com, we not only offer people, extra little prizes for buying the book, but we also then give them access to resources on the website. So we have resources for information about themselves and do like an assessment of what their toxic load is. If a person has a disease already, they can put in the disease and it'll show them which toxins are most likely causing that disease. We link over to laboratories that we think are really good for objectively assessing a person's toxic load. And we also make recommendations for where you can buy the safest products. The people that, from my assessment, I think they're the healthiest. They're the ones my family uses ourselves because we think that they're reliable products. So we're kind of on a mission right now to really help people understand why they're unhealthy and what they can do about it, because we should be healthy. And as you nicely mentioned about my family, I got to know my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather never saw a doctor in his life and lived age 95. And it's been downhill ever since as we put more and more toxins into our environment.
Absolutely. So again, thank you so much, Doctor. This is going to be episode 228. So I'll have links to all of that on 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/228. And again, Dr. Pizzorno, thank you so much for being on 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you. Take care.
After today's conversation, you have a few tools and a few things that you can kind of get started on. And then I would, again, highly recommend that you go get the book. This is a really good book for you to kind of get a better understanding of some of the toxins we're dealing with on a daily basis through the plastics, through our skincare products, and just, through our food. And so kind of understanding all the stuff that's going on, and really, honestly, more and more added to this soup of chemicals and toxins we're facing each day. So making sure that your body is in its best shape to deal with those toxins by, having pretty much a detox style lifestyle with our food and what we're doing with our gut and our liver and our kidney. And Dr. Pizzorno does a really good job in the book of kind of laying that out in a program that you can go through to make sure that you're living an optimal lifestyle. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, I discuss saboteurs. Are there people keeping you from reaching your health and fitness goals? Until then, have a happy and healthy day.